Hi there, this is Jeff Schultz with ICS. We're happy to have you again today for our weekly webinar on what we call COVID Convo. And we're excited to share with you what we've learned over the last week from the Department of Health, from the MDE and other organizations, and then also share our continual stories as these the three school districts we have working together on this, share their experiences on how life's been going over the last week. What have they been learning? What challenges have they seen? What are they in their districts? Again, I want to remind folks that are on the webinar, feel free to use the chat function, provide questions to our panelists as well as our organization. We're happy to try our best to answer your questions. And if you don't get an answer today, you will be able to get an answer on our frequently asked questions and on our website. So we continue to post information on our website, including copies of and recordings of these weekly webinars. So thank you for joining us this afternoon. We are from each of the districts, we're going to specifically get into a little bit more of the academic preparation that's being done, working with teachers, and they'll be sharing their experiences with that. We're going to talk about contract tracing. How are the districts looking to handle that? What role is the service cooperatives in assisting with that? We'll be talking about that as well. We're going to be looking for updates on the different reopening plans. One of the things we're seeing across the state is school districts adjusting their plans according to the data that's coming from their regional county as continued cases go up. We're also going to get an update from Jeremy Kovash about the service cooperatives, the distribution of materials, the work that they're doing in partnership with the state of Minnesota going forward. Todd Rapps joining us as well to talk through communications and provide some updates from that perspective. We've got Neil Carlson again with the University of Minnesota. Again, thanks Neil for continuing to update us on topics like masks and now the new saliva tests, and you'll be sharing that information with us as well. So thanks everyone for joining us. You'll notice I'm broadcasting my group from the Grand Rapids School District, ISD 318. Second week in a row, we're opening some new elementary schools. So I've been up here quite often in the last few weeks. So with that, I'm going to turn things over to Fred Nolan to give us an update on what we've learned this week from MDH and MDE. Fred?
Thanks, Jeff. And the topics, those of you who've been with us over the weeks, the topics from this week come from the poll you completed last week. The two highest rated things were contact tracing and more about the education models that people were using and how they were launching those models. But yesterday in the commissioner's call-in, they spent quite a bit of time discussing how you address employee work requests from home. And it's a function of two executive orders, and it's a interplay between those two. The first one is Executive Order 2074, which basically says people are supposed to work from home if their essential functions can be done from home. And the second one is from the executive order we're more familiar with, which is the Education one, 2082, that says you must make accommodations when staff are requested for staff whose health is at risk or members of their household is at risk to the extent possible, which is that troubling 4 words at the end of that sentence. They did say you're supposed to treat these on a case-by-case basis and not make blanket statements. That may be kind of tricky. And they say they're supposed to have guidance out in the planning document. I would expect it to be on page 20 where the worker protection part is. It was supposed to be out yesterday. I've not seen it yet. So if you're facing requests from staff for these accommodations to work from home, this is what you're supposed to do and deal with it on a case-by-case basis. As we're getting closer to reopening school, I hope that you're not getting many requests at this time that those have come in the past, but if you are, this is what you're to do. There's 3 other topics they talked about. One is Tier 1 critical worker childcare was clarified and narrowed. It's only if there is no one home who is not a critical tier 1 worker. So if it's a married couple or a household with 2 people in a household and one is not a tier 1 critical worker, you do not need to provide free childcare. The assumption is that person will provide the childcare. Also, it's only on your school calendar, and it's only for school hours that you need to provide the free care. You can offer additional care as you can with other members of the community and staff if you do that on a regular basis or you have that set up. Secondly, if you've elected to have a more restrictive model than what is allowed by your public health data in your county, let's say you're allowed to have a hybrid or in-person model and you're choosing to go distance learning, you can run portions of your program in the allowable model. So if you're distance learning, you can run sports if you're allowed to have hybrid or in-person. Or you could have parts of your sections, reading into their answer, you could have like your CTE classes as a hybrid while everybody else is distance learning. And lastly, not listed on this, is the extent of time permitted when you transition from one model to the next. We're going to hear today about one of our school districts that's transitioned already and they haven't even started. But once you've started, there's 5 days in the year which can be used for transition and counted for instruction. I think the department realized that, oh, that's kind of short. We hope as people move back and forth between these models. So the commissioner said you can have more transition days in the year with MDE's permission to be counted as instructional days. So I think there's a little pressure off there as you transition between models. She did conclude that section and said the goal is to get everybody to in-person and stay there. And that's, I think, everyone's goal, but she made it explicit. You can get more of these details at the blog site on ICS Reopening Schools, and I'd be happy to answer any questions in chat. But I think now we're going to turn it over to Andy Almos from East Central. Andy?
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us again for another week of a lot more questions and a lot more unknowns, and hopefully we can help provide a little bit more clarity. Here in Pine County, our numbers on paper remain quite low. This week's number, our case rate number was 1.37. If you look at the history of our data, it looks really good, right? It looks like it continues to drop. In our weekly meetings, I'm picking up a much different tone from our public health officials. They have a much more cautious tone than they've ever had because all of the counties around us are seeing increased numbers. So on paper, our number is low, but they are telling us to prepare that number is probably going to climb. They're reaching out to us saying, hey, are you ready to transition? Have you walked through this? Are your teachers prepared? And so we're in that process of continuing to talk through what that looks like. But as of today, we sit here a little bit over a week away from opening school, and we are planning for an in-person learning scenario. And our teachers come back next week for workshop week, and then their planning will be focused on that as well. We currently have 68 students registered for distance learning. That number may seem small to some of you, but we are the small school model in this endeavor. So for us, that represents about 8.5% of our population. With our distance learning model, our secondary students will Zoom into each classroom each day. That's been an interesting development for some of our kids that thought distance learning would be on their own schedule. But they actually are going to attend their 7-period day just like they always would. These lessons will be recorded. The kids will be able to participate just like they would in any other classroom setting. And all of that information will be posted on Schoology. That's the platform we use to support secondary kids, regardless of what the learning model is. In the elementary school, we have 3 dedicated teachers for distance learning. They are getting ready to launch on day 1. That was our expectation of them, that ready on day 1, just like any other staff member. They've already reached out and had class meetings virtually, meeting with parents, and they're ready to go. We're seeing some fluctuation, right? We add 4 kids to distance learning today, but we might have 2 that change their mind and then switch to in-person. So our numbers are fluctuating a little bit, but really the distance learning numbers are growing some. I just put the link in the screenshot there of our website. Those of you that want to just take a look and see what we're doing with our reopening plans, it's all listed there. All 3 models are listed. And again, our job right now as school leaders is to help to be ready to transition between these. So much of our administrative meetings each day is focused on, are we ready if we have to make this change tomorrow? All right, moving into contact tracing. So what does this mean and how will we do this? Our public health department is really stepping up and providing support and leadership, and we're really excited to have them coming alongside us with this because we're really nervous about it, probably like every school district is. Just a point to note, we are installing 4 thermal imaging cameras into our school. So the bus entrances, the main entrances are going to have these cameras that will actually take students' temperatures. It can take temperatures at 30 kids per time. So, and they just walk by. The system will actually also tell us if they're wearing a mask or not. There's a lot of features to these cameras and they're expensive, but we think that's a nice way to scan our people and to have everybody ready, to be ready to come to school that day. That system will actually email pictures of people who are not complying or who have a temperature elevated that we need to look further. So very, very sophisticated, interesting system there. But our public health is excited about that thermal imaging system, but also they have dedicated 1 staff member per school district in our county to be our point person. So we're calling it the buddy system with our public health department, which is very reassuring because we have a point of contact to reach out to when we have these questions. The challenge we have with contact tracing is what is the rumor mill and what is reality? And public health is strongly advising us to treat all things like they're real cases. So in our small town communities, if we hear that Johnny has been tested or has been exposed, we intend to treat every one of those like a positive case. And public health will come to our school district, either virtually or be here on site, and they will meet with everybody that has to be involved. So the teachers that may be affected, our health office, the administrators, custodial departments, whoever may need to be involved, and they'll give us direction. That may mean that we divide up who needs to contact people. We may prepare a letter together about who needs to have that information, but they intend to be here as soon as physically possible to be on site and helping us with this contact tracing process. They're strongly advising, would you just go back one there, Aaron, thanks. They're strongly advising empathy for students, parents, and staff members because it's gonna happen probably even the first week when people start talking about symptoms and temperatures and things like that happen on a regular school setting, encouraging empathy that if parents decide that they're gonna keep their kids home, then that's what they're gonna do. And we need to be okay with those things. It's kind of like talking to your legal department. The answer is always, it depends. When it comes to contact tracing, it really will depend. They're telling us that there's a lot of factors that will go into this and it will not be a black and white scenario. They won't be able to say that an entire classroom of kids has to quarantine or an entire school has to shut down. It really will depend on what's happened. So when they come and meet with us, they're going to be asking questions like, how much or how long of an exposure did these kids have in the same classrooms or same rooms? How strictly were the masking requirements followed? Were there breaks given to kids when maybe there shouldn't have been? They're going to ask those questions. And of course, social distancing, proximity to one another. Was that followed closely? There is a chance that kids that sit in the back of the room may not need to quarantine if the kid in the front of the room was exposed. They're telling us it really will depend on each individual situation. So for the districts on the call, if you don't have these things talked through, or if you haven't gone through this with public health, I would strongly advise you to ask them these questions and see if they are able to support you and be on site if you have an exposure. We're also talking about isolation spaces. Every illness is going to be treated like COVID. So we are going to need to be able to isolate kids and to put them in places while they're awaiting pickup from their family. So our health office will be the screening location. When we have these concerns, that's where they'll go. We have 4 locker rooms in our facility that will not be used very much this year. So we intend potentially to use those as isolation spaces while we're waiting for pickup. We have 1 open classroom in the building that may be used as well, depending on the number of kids. But our challenge, like everybody's, is going to be supervision of students. Not only supervision, but safety. What kind of safety are we going to put in place when it comes to masking? I'm hearing from Neil that these staff members are going to need N95 masks and a face shield. So first of all, who's willing to do that? And can we keep them safe as well while these kids are isolated? And of course, not only do we need all this in place, but we need backup plans. If our staff gets sick, or if there's so many kids that we need to put them in many locations, what are the backup plans? So we're working through that right now with our school nurse in our custodial department. Public health, when it comes to contact tracing, is also has pushed out to us some form letters so that we can be ready to communicate if there's an exposure and or if there's a confirmed lab test. So we have these letters ready and with our letterhead and ready to list the classroom and grade level potentially. Of course, we can't list the kid's name or the staff member's name, but we do have this communication ready to go. They've also have given us some information we can share with parents at next week's Beep and Greet. We're not doing our open house. We're doing a drive-through open house. And we want to share with them what will parents do and what can they look for with their kids if there's an exposure or if the kid just isn't feeling well. Just a few other updates from East Central in the last week. Next week is workshop week. All of our staff meetings we would normally have are going to be shifted to virtual events. We're really trying to limit the amount of people in the same room at any given time, even when our staff members are in the building and in their own spaces. We're continuing our discussions with our bargaining groups. We've had some concerns raised by our support staff and our teachers union. I sent back to them, it's almost a 5-page letter answering their questions, trying to alleviate concerns, but we're going to continue those conversations because I think we're apt to hear more concerns even once the year starts. I keep telling everybody we have to focus on what we can control. This weekend coming up, there's a rather large gathering in one of our towns. It's a community event, not hosted by the school district. Public health has voiced concerns, the sheriff's office has voiced concerns, but the reality is we can't control that. We need to focus on what can we control to get our school reopened. And again, we're doing those tabletop drills to have our administrative teams ready to transition between models. And lastly, I think now is the time we need to make sure we're instilling confidence in our community. So Executive Director Deb Hinton of MASA had put out some tips for school leaders to communicate, and I've listed those here. We're going to be ready. We're prepared. We're going to provide a quality personalized education for every kid, regardless of what learning model that we're in. We've pivoted before. Teachers are great at monitoring and adjusting. They've done it their whole careers and they know what to do, and we'll do it here. Staff have been included with the plan, so we've tried to collect as much input as possible so we're ready. Cleaning and sanitizing is a thing that was just going to become routine. That's just what we do at school now. And our kids are ready to be back at school. I can't tell you how many kids have reached out to our staff and our principals saying, we really want to be there. And so we're excited to hear that from our kids. And our families are relying on our school system, and they're excited to be back here, and we're excited to have them back. And so we think now is the time to start instilling that confidence and communicating that it's going to be okay, and we're ready to do this. So that's the East Central updates.
Thank you, Andy. Great information to share with all of us. I'm Dan Voce, Superintendent of Mora Public Schools, and I'm going to share a little bit about our reality here and our scenarios. And yesterday, with our weekly meeting with Kanabec County Public Health, we were revealed our case counts in our county have gone up significantly. As you can see at the bottom of the screen, we were in that 2, 5, 3, 3, pretty similar to Pine County. And then all of a sudden, the last couple of weeks, we've jumped up to 10, but we were still planning to do in person because many of the cases were not traced back to the school. And so there was not a huge risk for us at school. However, yesterday at our meeting, our rate was up to 16.24 per 10,000. And so that is, closer to 20 than it is to 10. So the recommendation of Kanabec County Public Health was to do phase 2 in our model, and that would be in person for elementary and hybrid for high school. So that word pivot, we made a quick little pivot there, and we happened to have a board meeting last night. So I quickly after 3:30 got some information out to our school board members and shared that the recommendation was to go hybrid at the high school. So I shared that information at the board meeting, and then we shared it with our staff quickly after. And I guess that gives us an opportunity to live the transition mode right now. And fortunately, it's a week before school starts. I think that's kind of a positive thing that we have some time to react. We have some time to get good communication out. We've structured our plans to be able to transition smoothly. We have all of our students into an A or B group. We have our transportation set up so we can socially distance everybody on the bus, and our school schedule, as I'll mention, is already prepared to do a and a B group. So we have that block scheduling, and so I think we're ready to do that. However, there's a lot of details, like we just figured out. What about devices? How are we going to get devices to everybody in the B group that isn't going to start school on the first day? So we'll have some details to work out, but we'll be able to work those out quickly. So one of the things that I guess I should mention too is it's an opportunity to work with our regional members and Kanabec County Public Health. And we have a meeting scheduled this afternoon with our regional MD and MDH just to kind of walk through that scenario system. So that'll be a good practice for us to kind of figure out what type of support we'll get. I know there was a lot of, there still is a lot of talk on contact tracing, and like Andy mentioned, our public health has been wonderful to work with and really supportive, and they gave us an actual scenario to walk through with the area superintendents along with the public health. And so some of the things that we've been talking about is, what if it's a student who tests positive? What if it's a staff member? What if it's a visitor? How long do people quarantine for? Do we quarantine, like Andy mentioned, is it just the teacher? Is it the whole class? Is it just certain individuals? What about the staff member that is quarantined? Are they able to teach? That's come up. And so there's a lot of questions. I'm not sure if we have all the answers yet, but we're working on getting those. They talked about close contacts, contacts of contacts. So in other words, friends. And I guess one of the things that the superintendent I feel good about is public health is, they've been practicing that all summer, and they're going to be there to support us. And it sounds like the regional groups will be there to support us as well. And then, we're just talking through, what does that communication look like to parents, to staff members, to community, and those sample letters that Kanabec County Public Health will help us with. As I read through the regional support team, I feel pretty confident that they're going to be there to support us through that contact tracing. Our district nurse is on the MDH calls every week, so she feels like there's going to be more information coming out on that, along with public health. So I think we're in a good situation. And our admin team actually practiced the same scenario, and so their wheels were turning along with the superintendents. And so that might be something that we do as a school building too, just so people start thinking about What if it's a student? What if it's a staff? What if it's in athletics? We already had an athletic one earlier this summer during the summer training session. So we had a little practice with that as well. And so I think that's what I have on contact tracing. And of course, academic preparation, as Andy said, our teachers are going to be coming back. And one of the things that's worked well with our district and with our school teams, we've been doing, we call them town hall meetings, which is kind of like what we're doing here, is we're having conversations with our staff as at the district level, just having people walk through, this is our plan for the elementary, this is our plan for the high school, this is our plan for food service, this is our plan for transportation, this is our plan for the whole thing, and just slowly walking our staff through that so they feel confident that if they get questions in the public, they can answer them, and they feel confident that we do have a plan for all these different scenarios. But as you can see in the elementary model, we're going to be reducing as much movement. We have shortened our school day. Our specialist rotation is a little bit shorter. We're going to be doing more push-ins instead of having kids move around and cross-contaminate. We do have at each grade level, I guess maybe this is a fortunate thing that we have enough staffing that we can provide a push-in for an interventionist and an enrichment teacher to support our students on both ends of the MTSS spectrum. And then, of course, trying to teach our kids all the proper hand washing and masking and things of that sort. At the high school, like I mentioned earlier, we're going to be splitting our groups into A group and B group. And one group will meet like on a Monday, Tuesday. The other will be meeting on Thursday, Friday, with Wednesday we'll take off to do some cleaning and also give our staff some more time to prepare. We're doing block scheduling, so which would be 8 periods, and so we're going to do half the classes on one day and the other half on another day. So that'll eliminate a lot of movement. And like Andy mentioned, we have some kids, we call it a family flex. So students or families that do not feel comfortable coming to school, they will attend virtually. And we've had some different ideas, like East Central, you just attend your class like normal. And then also we've talked about doing flipped classrooms as well. So yeah, we're trying to work through, like, our first week of school is only 4 days. So we're like, okay, what are we going to do? We weren't ready for that. So I think we're going to do like Tuesday, Wednesday, and then we'll get our other kids on a Thursday, Friday. So we won't have that Wednesday off per se. I think the next slide, or I might be done. Oh, I just wanted to mention communications. And, you know, if we've been working hard like every other school district to try to get as much information to our parents and our staff members. We do have some really nice documents you're more than welcome to replicate, like a quick reference guide, a 1-page reference guide that parents and staff members can print out and see how we're going to move from each model and how that might impact transportation, lunches, all those sort of things. We've been also doing like weekly updates to parents. We've been doing some videos and things of that sort, such as Tim is doing in Bemidji, probably not the same quality, but we've been trying to do that. And then this document on the right is a gateway document, and that links pretty much all of our plans. So you don't have to read through the entire plan to find out what you want to do. Maybe MDE should do that for their 115-page document. That might be helpful. So anyways, if we can be of help or service to anybody, feel free to look at our website and contact me, and I'd be happy to get back to you. I think that's all we have from Mora.
And thank you, Dan. And I agree. Scanning that 100-page document to find 1 2-paragraph change is pretty maddening. But thanks for your change and the transition just this week. So Tim, what's the story in Bemidji?
Well, first of all, I want to thank Dan and Andrew for their information. I'm Tim Lutz, the superintendent of Bemidji Area Schools. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us. I have a lot of similar information, but I'll try not to be redundant and provide mostly information that is more proprietary to the Bemidji School District and what we're doing. When it comes to the academic preparation, nothing has changed from the last couple of weeks. We're still all in for the elementary and hybrid for secondary, but our numbers are going down, and that is encouraging. You can see the top chart there is the MDH's reports and the 14-day rolling averages, and we took a nice drop from last week to this week. Now that might change a little bit as they go back and clean up some of the information, but I don't think it'll change a lot. And our daily counts that we get from our county health is the bottom chart there. And we have been floating right around the mid-9 area. We were at 9.33 on Tuesday, 9.41. We've been going up a little bit, but our daily counts are under 10. And that has been a nice predictor for us to see that we might be eventually getting close to that range where we are in the 0 to 9. And perhaps in the near future end up with our secondary students in school. But we're going to be careful about that. We want to make sure that we can sustain that for a while after, we're concerned about Labor Day and how that might spike the numbers a little bit. So we're not going to make a change suddenly if our numbers happen to go down. Our opt-in distance learning is one of our big stories. It just jumped like crazy this past week. We have 676 students as of today who are opting in for full-time distance learning. And that's about 3 times the student population of the school district I used to be in north of Bemidji when I was a superintendent. So that is a school within a school. And so we are continuing to work on building our distance learning team. I touched on that a little bit last week, but it'll be a dedicated team of teachers, some of whom are going to be able to teach from home because of underlying conditions, and other teachers that we're going to have to pull from the classroom on top of those students. And I'll get into that in just a little bit. But the academic preparation considerations, I want to point out that we have our back to work workshop week starting next week too. And like Andy said, most of our workshops will be virtual, at least in the district level from that perspective. Wednesdays are traditionally a large gathering in our high school auditorium of all 900 staff. We hand out awards, we do welcome announcements. This year, we are recording all of those messages ahead of time and then streaming them through YouTube to the different school buildings as the different school staffs are assembled in rooms that will allow for social distancing. In our elementaries, which are our K through 5, my apologies for that, as all in person, we are doing our best to make sure that our elementary students continue to stay in cohorts as long as possible, as much as possible during each day. We also have shortened specialist rotations to allow for more time on some of the core subjects in the elementary, reading and math in particular. Our K-3 music will be delivered virtually. Music teachers can actually deliver their lessons through videos and send them to the classrooms. Our 4 and 5, that's when they start with band, choir, and orchestra. And those students will begin to practice some of the exercises that our middle and high school students will be doing, which will be to hum in choir and to put masks or bell covers on their horns. And as much as possible, when it's theory or music appreciation, that will be virtual. Practices, as much as possible, will be held outside as long as weather permits. Media Center, we will have the specialists deliver materials every week, let them sit for a little bit. There'll be little weekly libraries, and then they'll rotate in and out the following week with new materials. At the secondary, which is our hybrid model, A and B weeks, that's grades 6 through 12, because 6, 7, and 8 is in our middle school. Students are going to rotate on a weekly basis. They'll attend virtually during their off-week learning days, but they'll be working with their regular classroom teacher during those weeks when they are off from school. I didn't put anything about music in here, so I'll just mention it now. We have been working really hard on our music plans. We have show choir, we have orchestra, choir, and band. And they'll be doing much the same things that the elementary schools will be doing with bell covers, students in choir humming instead of singing. We'll be working on a 30-minute time schedule for music rooms where after if it's not an outside setting, which it will be as much as possible, students will leave their choir room or band room after 30 minutes and go to a new room, start fresh. And at that point, it'll become more music theory and music appreciation and not actually playing in music. Our distance learning team, which I'll talk about in a little bit, will be working with those over 600, and that number will grow when it comes to providing lessons, and I'll get into that in just a bit. But one other thing we're working on with our A and B weekly rotation is making sure that it's equitable for everyone. Right now, we looked at the A week and the B week, and as luck would have it, the A week happens to always be shortened because that's the week there is MEA, that's the week of Thanksgiving, that's the week of early Christmas break. So there's a 5-day difference that we're going to have to try to make an adjustment for. One more thing I should mention is that we're also working with Ed Minnesota on an MOU. And one of the things that we're trying to tell them is that a lot of the things they're asking for in the MOU is already covered by statute or the executive order. So it's not necessary to have them in the MOU. So taking a look at this slide, you can see that this is our summary of how many students have opted into distance learning or opted out of the classroom. And for instance, you can see the BMS stands for Bemidji Middle School. There are 177 students out of 1,300 and some who are distance learning. Now that's practically a whole pod of students. Jean Dillon, 106 students. That is 4 classes, 2 of 4th grade and 2 of 5th grade. So along with working with the teachers who have been identified or who have self-identified as being those who have underlying conditions that make them more vulnerable and who will be distance teaching, we're also pulling some teachers from these pods or in Jean Dillon from these classes. In Jean Dillon, we're only pulling 2 teachers because we want to keep 2 more on standby in case after a week or 2, we have a mass exodus out of distance learning back into our schools, and we want to be prepared for that. But if we can go to the next slide, you can see that we have between 15 and 20 teachers that we have now either identified or will be identifying to work with distance learning 100% per grade level. So there'll be a kindergarten teacher doing distance learning for all kindergarten students in the district, 1st grade, 2nd grade, all the way through most of middle school. We have also decided we need to hire a lead teacher or almost like a dean of students to help with this new school within a school who will then address behaviors, attendance, and will support and observe teachers and help them with some of the issues that they might have with discipline, with technology concerns, or those kinds of issues. And what is really going to be different here now is that the high school is a little bit different of a model or a creature when it comes to distance learning. At the high school, we have quite a few students also who have opted for distance learning, but we can't just say we're going to take a 9th grade teacher or an 11th grade teacher and cover all 11th graders, because now we're getting into the point where we have a lot of electives. If we have a number of students who are in college calculus or college anatomy, the teacher of record who takes care of that class is simply going to have to be the teacher for these distance learning students, as well as his own class and his hybrid learning team of students. And in order to compensate and make up for that, we're allowing those teachers a little bit more prep time. Traditionally, we have a 4-period block schedule, 90 minutes each, and teachers have 60 minutes of prep time and 30 minutes of other supervisory assignment time. We're giving them that 30 minutes back each day so that they can work on what they need to do to provide distance learning for those groups of students who are in those settings. On the next slide, getting into contact tracing, I can be a bit briefer here because we're doing much the same as the other 2 schools have talked about with county health and rapid response teams helping us. We don't have a county health person available for each of our buildings, but they're going to help us at the district level. We also have 30 thermal imaging cameras that we're bringing in. And I think they're probably the same cameras Andrew mentioned, because they cover 30 students at a time. They can cover up to a window of 8 to 10 feet in width. They're pricey, but we think that'll be one of the best ways to build confidence and to catch people with temperatures. And we'll actually be able to set them up on tripods, and we'll save a lot of labor that will help pay for the cost of these cameras. We are going to be using the guidance from MDE with the language to use for notification purposes that came through yesterday, taking a look at those sample template letters. And our district nurse and our school building nurses, one for each building, will be the local contacts for contact tracing. Administrators will help, and even district staff, including myself, will help if we need to with some of the contact tracing. And we have isolation rooms set up in each building. We're also working on the rumor versus reality concerns and being very conscientious about HIPAA and FERPA violations as we share with parents and with the public about cases that might come up or that will come up. The next slide shows sort of a screenshot of a dashboard of what that thermal imaging camera looks like. And you can see on the right, you can see something that's in red. That is a flagged student per se who has a temperature of above normal. And that is what will be emailed to the district nurse or the building nurse. And that we hope is going to help us quite a bit with our contact tracing. But of course, we're going to be calling that student in right away, double check temperature, put that student in an isolation room, and make sure that parents are called to pick up that student if that student truly does have a temperature. We're also going to use those cameras in the hallways throughout the day, because we know and we believe that students will be coming to school maybe on Tylenol with artificially lower temperatures. And we want to make sure that as temperatures, as the Tylenol wears off during the day, we might be able to notice certain temperatures spiking later on. On the next slide, one of the things that we're really focusing on, and the other two alluded to this too, is communications. And I'm noticing some new developments in our district amongst parents and staff members who are beginning to ask more and more sophisticated questions that are challenging and that very revealing about their angst about the start of the school year. I received an email from one parent who said, "My husband tested positive for COVID. Healthcare has refused to test anyone else in my family who is living with him and who is exposed to him on a daily basis, because they said it doesn't matter if we're positive or not, we still have to quarantine. Therefore, they won't test us. My question is, how are you basing your school reopening plans on the weekly totals when Sanford Health is refusing to test the majority of people who are exposed to COVID in our area?" And so we're setting up weekly meetings with Sanford to be able to throw those questions at them and come up with good ways to answer those more sophisticated questions. But the key here is not only giving people information for the sake of making decisions about what model they want to, if they want to opt out into distance learning, but also to make sure we can build a sense of confidence in what we are doing. And so I've begun creating these weekly videos, and I just want to share with you about 30 seconds. If Aaron, you could launch it for me, please. Hi, I'm Tim Lutz, Superintendent of Bemidji Area Schools. During times of crisis, it's very important to communicate often and to communicate clearly. I don't think it's ever possible to over-communicate during a crisis situation. I would like to use this forum to visit with you about the reopening of Bemidji area schools this fall and to answer some commonly asked questions and hopefully to reduce anxiety and concerns about how schools will start in September. As of today, ISD 31 schools will be opening with 2 base learning models. The full in-school base scenario for elementary schools serving kindergarten through 5th graders, and the model known as the hybrid model for secondary schools, which include Bemidji Middle School and Bemidji High Schools, grades 6 through 12. Thank you, Aaron. And it's only about, as you can see, a little over about 5.5 minutes long. And I'm talking very slowly because I think people, when they're under stress, need to process information a bit. They do a little more slowly. But This is an idea that I've been able to work up thanks to my work with RAP Strategies and Todd Rapp, because of our need to do virtual meetings with people about our operating levy. And I just suddenly woke up one day and realized this is a great forum for reaching out for questions and answers. So to be able to do these videos, and now we're moving into a situation where we're reaching out to the community, and business members are signing up their staff members, their employees, for conversations with me. I just had one with Paul Bunyan Communications staff a couple of evenings ago, and I have a couple more lined up with Bemidji State University parents and with the MnDOT parents in our area, to give them some information and then to let them ask questions, and then I'll answer them. And we just have to be as transparent as possible and to help build this sense of confidence amongst our parents that we are ready. And that's a wrap from Bemidji Area Schools. Thank you.
Well, thanks, Tim. And I sent you a question in chat. If you'd open it up and when we get to Q&A, if you'd respond, that'd be great. Lots of stuff going on in all three districts and great information. And now we're going to turn over to Jeremy Kovash and what's going on at the service co-op and regional support team level. Jeremy.
Hi, thanks for having me. Yeah, first of all, I'm going to start with PPE equipment. I believe has been primarily distributed throughout the state to most of the schools, so most have received that. I think it went relatively well. I know there were some, overages and shortages in the shipping, but I think those things are being taken care of. So I think 95% of school districts probably have their PPE, and most of those orders are correct. And those are the PPE that has come out of the governor's office. We are working with, and we'll have some training next week or discussion next week with our regional testing coordinators about saliva tests that will be available to school staff. So probably more information next Friday regarding those saliva tests and school staff, and there'll be a QRF code. The two slides that I have today, I think most of you have probably seen those if you were on your regional service cooperative call Monday and Tuesday of this week. And so the first one is just a kind of a reminder, 2 paths to support. So we have one of our school districts in Lakes Country that has a positive case of a staff member who was unfortunately this summer working with students in a child age daycare program. And it's been a good test case for us because they have said, do we contact the regional coordinator, as you can see, or do we contact the district, or do we contact public health? And in this case, I had a wonderful relationship with public health. So the school nurse contacted public health. The school superintendent contacted the regional coordinator, who in our region happens to be. So, I think the bottom line answer is communication is important. Relationships are important. If you have a great relationship with public health, do that. Carbon copy your regional coordinator. Send out an email and just say, hey, I talked to our regional coordinator today. We have a positive test case. And carbon copy your public health people. So I think that communication ring will get closer and tighter as we get into school and more of these cases. So we're excited about this work. Hopefully we don't have too much of it, but you can see that the regional support teams will provide guidance when there are cases. So again, those 2 epidemiologists will provide consultation, collaboration to make decisions about learning models. So again, we'll work with MDH, MDE, and try to help you with shifting those learning models, how to maybe perhaps, I hope that what we develop as time goes on is a catalog of best practices and how we might notify public in a positive way. Sample letters to parents, those kind of things. I know many of you already have those, but we look forward to doing that. And then assistance with the testing, as I mentioned, the saliva test. So we're very much still in training mode. I think kind of the regional support teams are getting to know each other. And again, we look forward to that work. We're happy that the PPE, I think, went well, distribution. And that could be round 1 of PPE. We hope that that's the end and final. The one little bit of piece of, well, 2 things I'd like to share. One is in working with county public health, it is our understanding, I just heard this morning for the first time, that county public health can actually work with county wastewater to find out a little bit in advance if an uptick or a rise in COVID cases might be coming. So there's some wastewater testing that apparently shows that there could be a rise in COVID working with wastewater. So I heard that for the first time this morning, so don't quote me on that. Perhaps a doctor from the University of Minnesota can touch on that if he has any knowledge. That was new information to me. And then secondly, if you have not, this is just a tip, and I think, again, most of you have done that. I think I shared this a couple weeks ago. You know, the county and the townships received additional CARES money. Many townships across Minnesota, probably especially rural Minnesota, perhaps don't know what to do with that money. They don't maybe feel that fits into the CARES money. I would definitely work with your county and reach out to those. In our region, many of our school districts have received some additional funding for PPE, for mental health, for food distribution, for professional development surrounding COVID from county dollars. And we're going to try to dig into township dollars as well and get those to share them. The caveat here, of course, is those CARES dollars that were distributed to the counties and in turn to townships, they need to be expended by December 30th. So if you have not talked to your county, that would be my one little bit of advice or tip to try to reach out and do that. So with that, Fred, that's all I have.
Well, thanks, Jeremy. Before we go to Neil, there's a quick question for Soraya from Soraya Driscoll in East Grand Forks. Do you happen to know who the contact regional support person in Northwest is, or how she would find out who that person is?
I am almost positive, Soraya, it's Chris Wavra, but shoot Bruce Jensen an email and he would have it. Maybe Tim knows. Tim's on. Maybe Tim Lutz knows. But I think it is.
Barb Nelson.
Thank you. Good. Thank you for correcting me, sir.
Well, and Barb and Chris are like, they
Okay.
work very closely together, but so.
Thanks, Tim.
Right. Well, Neil, there was a headline about new saliva testing and a big state contract. Can you enlighten schools what might come of that for them, and a little more on PPE, especially for these timeout rooms where we're waiting for kids to get picked up who are ill?
Sure, I'll address the saliva test first. It was developed at I believe it was Rutgers University or Baylor, one of the two universities out east. And they've developed a test that you can take at home, take saliva, send it in a test tube, send it out for analysis, and the anticipated turnaround time is about 2 days for the analysis. The state of Minnesota has set up a contract with this outside firm. They will have a telemedicine person that you can log in with so that you make sure that you take the saliva sample accurately so that there's a good chance that you'll get an accurate test. The results tend to be 98% either yes or no with maybe a 2% inconclusive. And if you have an inconclusive test, then they'd recommend that you follow up with maybe a standard PCR test, which is a swab that goes up your nose. The first set of samples that will be out, at least according to the Minnesota Department of Education site, is that they will be distributed free. So every teacher will have at least one test for free that they can take and use that. The false negative rate, at least according to the website, is going to be around 10%. I would anticipate that might be a little bit higher given that it's the manufacturer that's stating that number. It compares, if that's true, it compares favorably to the false negative rate that you have for the swab test, which varies between 25 and 35%. So that's really helpful. The second piece that I wanted to address that just kind of came up with was a little bit dialing back on some of the both the singing and the working with band members. I've recommended for the university marching band to follow some of the similar approaches that we've had and that you can do a tissue paper test in front of that covering that you have on the instrument. And if the tissue deflects, then we should have a little stronger fabric material covering the end of that wind instrument. The other thing that I talked to them about is that if you can reduce the volume of both the humming and the playing of the band instrument, you're reducing the density of particles that are pushed out from that person. So if we can do things at half volume, that's a lot better than full volume. So that's something to think about if you're going to talk with your people in high school. With respect to contact trace, the wastewater one that we want to talk about, I've heard some discussion about it. I think because of the volume of water, I don't know if there's enough sensitivity to be completely effective on that, but I will be doing some follow-up and then send some notes back to ICS so that they can post it on their blog or website. With respect to contact tracing, I think they've been doing a good job at least discussing it, and it's going to be a highly variable or somewhat variable between districts. The piece that I've been dealing with is that we had one of our staff members that actually tested positive for COVID, and she explained all the scenarios that she was going through. The one thing that you will not have, or at least she did not have, is you will not be tested again, because you may have some of the viral particles still in, but they're looking more at, do you have any fever? If you have no fever without medication for at least a day, are you feeling better, and has it been more than 10 days? And if you can say yes to all three of those, then that's at a point where you can consider coming back in to your regular job duties. But you have to say yes to all three of those things. Any other questions or things that you wanted addressed?
The PPE for those rooms, staff that are supervising a suspected case before the parents come pick them up. I think that staff's gonna be far more vulnerable than a teacher in a presumed COVID-free classroom. Yeah,
and what we're doing, it would be, if appropriate, if we have the appropriate PPE, it would be an N95 with a face shield would be the best approach to it. If you're in a situation where that's not possible, then you could go with a KN95 or a surgical mask, again with a face shield, and that paraprofessionals to do their best to maintain social distancing as best you can. If you're going to choose a room for that, I would choose a room that has fairly good air exchange. We were looking at places where we were going to do fit testing or flu shots for the U, and we had several really large areas, but they had no air change. So you want to have a good space with good air change, and that'll help out minimize the likelihood of transmission as well.
Thank you, Neil. That's really good advice for the folks that are online here. Well, Todd, we're just about out of the hour, but do you have a couple tidbits for the crew here? Todd Rapp?
Sure, I'd be happy to add a couple things, Fred. And I'm up in northern Pine County right now. I'm keeping an eye on Andy's good work up here.
Okay, go ahead.
Hello?
Go ahead. Yes.
Fred, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead. He might not be able to hear us.
Okay. Okay. A few pieces of information that that a community is going to react to contact tracing with basically following the same tone that you establish. If you make it into a crisis, the community will treat it like a crisis. If you make it into, well, this is the normal we're going to have to operate under, we suggested the tone that you want to give to the community as you step in. I would also suggest that you work very closely with public health in your area. with them on the talking points and the messaging the districts. You start a contact tracing program based on a positive test or multiple positive tests, that you go through a cadence of several messages per day. Not just one to your staff and your parents, but actually several per day, and then start to extend it out as the situation unfolds. And the reason for that is because people are going to be looking for information from a variety of sources, and the quicker that both you and public health is out there with the same message, the better. One other thing I'd recommend, and I'm stealing directly from crisis management theory, and that is that the folks that you have working on the operations side, they're the people who are doing the contact tracing, and they're the people who are managing the transition that you need to make within people, because you're going to end up having a lot of intake and a lot of outing in that, while other people are managing the problem itself. If you possibly can, keep those functions separate when you're going through the contact tracing program. Happy to answer other questions that people have. You can email me directly during Zoom.
Okay. Thank you, Todd. We can tell you we're in rural Pine County with intermittent internet. And Andy, you're going to have a challenge there as well. Well, we're just about out of time. In fact, we're a little over time. But if there's any hot burning questions, please send them in or signal to unmute. I did ask Tim if the teachers who are in his distance learning school of nearly 650 students were those who had asked to work from home or asked for accommodations, and he said yes, for the most part that was. So that was great, where those folks who request to work from home, need accommodations, matches up the students that are requesting the same. That's the ideal picture. Not all districts are able to do that. I think Roseville had to go to hybrid, had to go to in distance learning because it couldn't get there. So.
Hey, Fred, I'll offer one piece of advice. And I thought when you heard Andrew Almos talk about his district with regards to isolation rooms and, where are you going to put kids when they are sick or are not feeling well? And he talked about the locker rooms. And we've had a number of districts talk to us about that. Locker rooms are typically negative air spaces where, again, large exhaust systems to keep that area negative because of, smelly locker rooms and those types of things. They are actually good places and they aren't going to be used much, just like Andy had talked. So yeah, you see Neil Carlson giving that thumbs up. It's a really good idea to consider your locker rooms if the HVAC systems are functioning properly to be utilized for those types of rooms. And one other comment too is had a number of districts that haven't addressed upgrades to ventilation projects and wondering how do we do that? How do we do it really fast? You really don't. One of the biggest challenges to change out ventilation systems to meet today's ASHRAE standards is it's a massive construction project. So a number of districts are saying we should really start thinking about that for the future, whether we're in a pandemic or not. So again, another thing, if it could be of any assistance to districts when they're talking about those types of requests, we're certainly here to help. So.
Right, and the conference yesterday at the commissioner's level said that there's a lot of flexibility in the CRF funding. In fact, if you needed an extra bus for your transportation, buying a bus with CFR money would be acceptable. I would think if even just the planning for an HVAC system may be an acceptable expense if it can be expended between now and December 30th. So there's a lot of flexibility there. I'm not seeing any questions. Aaron, are you seeing anything?
No, no questions have been asked.
Okay, well, I really want to thank the superintendents and Neil and Todd for their information. This was a wealth of information for those folks who are online. And we'll be back again next Friday. It's going to be right before Labor Day. And one of the things I'm going to ask our districts to focus on is how are they going to stay in touch with families and deal with the social emotional strain of all this, as whether students are coming to school or not in school and on distance learning. So let's kind of go into how are you going to maintain good climate and good public mental health through this whole process just before we go into Labor Day. So Jeff, your turn to wrap up.
Yeah, well, so once again, I just want to thank everybody. First of all, I thank our panelists taking the time to share your stories. We know how challenging it is, particularly as superintendents right now, and all the time and effort you're working on getting these kids back to school in a safe way. I want to really thank you to do that. I know Jeremy left the call. Thanks to the service co-ops for what they're doing. They've got kind of thrown into the fire here. On behalf of all children across the state, the service co-ops are providing some great service for the entire state of Minnesota. I want to thank them for that. All the panelists, Neil, continuing to help us be here to provide medical perspective and health perspective is greatly appreciated. Thanks everybody for your time and effort. Fred, your leadership, and we look forward to seeing you at next week's call. Thank you, everyone.